Hello viewers, welcome to another video. I'm going to be working on this 2001 Nissan Pathfinder with the 3.3 V6. You'll find the same engine in the Xterra and the Frontiers. I don't know what years. The Xterra is going to be like 2000 to 2004 or 5. 2004. Pathfinder started a little earlier, 96 or 97. Same with the Frontiers, I think. So, but they're all pretty much the same. The only big difference I've noticed is the Pathfinder has a little bit different orientation with this accessory drive, which shouldn't make a big difference when if you're watching this video to do a, let's say you got a Frontier and you're trying to figure out how to do your valve covers. It should be the same. My buddy did tell me that sometimes you have an EGR valve and sometimes you don't. This one does have it, so we'll go through taking that off. If you don't, then you don't have to worry about it. So that's what's going on with that. Most common symptom of having a leaking valve cover gasket is usually when you fire it up, you'll get some smoke coming out of here, and maybe it'll smell oil inside the car when you're driving, because the oil is going to be, I can't really see that one, but you'll see the oil will leak right from the seal right here down onto the exhaust manifold, and then the oil will burn up, and which will cause a little oily smell and some smoke. And as you can see, it's not going to be a super easy job because of all this that we got going on around here. So we got a lot of stuff to take off in order to get this upper intake manifold off, in order to get that valve cover off to change the gasket. So I mean, if that one weren't leaking, I don't even think I'd bother with it. I'd just do this side, but they're both leaking, so we're gonna just have to tear into this thing. I've never done one of these, but my buddy has, and I called him and asked him like what's going on, like as far as if there's any like tricks or what's the crappy part about doing this. And he said the two things that are the most difficult is getting this EGR tube off here, which you can see the nut right there. You need to take that off because that's going to be that you need to have that line off, just because the EGR valve's attached here. And also another tricky thing is you got some coolant tubes that are connected, that are between the back of the engine and the firewall. Let's see if I can. There's some back there, and those are a pain to get off. So I guess we're gonna have to dive into this. I'm gonna get started by I guess just start taking the top layer of junk off. So might number these spark plug wires and get these off, at least the ones I have to go through the intake here. Take the throttle cables off, take all this vacuum line stuff off, and then start unplugging things. So maybe we can, I don't know if we necessarily have to move this wiring harness out of the way a lot or not, but we just got to start unburying things we got to take off. So I'm just getting ready to unhook this throttle linkage, and it's pretty easy. You just, with your finger, you flip it open to full throttle, and then you can get all this slack here in the cable, and then you'll see that little notch that you can push the end of the cable out of and have the cable clear, just like that. Same thing for both of these. I also took the spark plug wires out, and you'll notice I Just went ahead and took the whole cap off here. What I'm going to do is change the spark plugs when I have this off, because that'll make it a lot easier. I mean, the one here and the one here is not too bad, but that one in the very back is a nightmare. So I think if you haven't changed your spark plugs in a while, you could do it now. Save yourself a lot of misery by just putting the plugs in with the intake off. Also noticed somebody did the knock sensor relocation on this car. Now if you have a lot of experience with Nissans, you'll know that your knock sensor is always a problem, which is right there. And but that's not where the factory one is. The factory one's buried underneath the intake and everything, so it's a nightmare to change. So the trick is you get a knock sensor like this out of I don't know what kind of car they use, and they got a plug and they just wired it into the wires that are originally going to the one down there. Much easier job. So we're looking here at the middle of the intake. You got this wiring harness right here. It's held down in place by this one bracket, which I took off. You got these two ground straps right here. Those will go in to those two bolts here and there. So I just took all that stuff off and I screwed the little 10 millimeters back in so I don't lose them. I think that should be alright. This should be good to hang out right here for now. Now I'm going to move on. Probably said this last time, but now I'm actually going to move on to over here. I don't think we need to unhook all of this, because I mean this right here is going to come off with the intake, so these lines here can probably stay put. We just need to unhook the stuff that's like this one here is going around over here, so we need to get rid of that one. And I think there's one other one that's going to the brake booster we need to unhook. So I was going to mention this, but like I know in the past I've had issues with Nissan hoses, you know, getting hard or splitting, and this brake booster hose right here, you can see it plugs into this, goes around to this doodad here, and then another line starts and then works its way down there to the brake booster, and it is rock hard. Like you cannot squeeze that down at all, and I basically chiseled it away. I mean, it had pieces of this just chipping off. It's like it feels like a plastic hard line. So definitely gonna have to replace that, especially because the brake booster hose is a pretty important one. If you lose that, you will no longer have brake assist, and you'll acquire more force than you got to push that brake pedal down and stop in a big hurry. So really all there was the brake booster line, and then this line right here. It's an evap line. You can see the test port right there, and it just goes to right here. Everything else looks like it's self-contained here, just going from here to here, so we don't need to take that off. It'll stay with the intake. Oh, and then this is, see the blue right here, that's where this plug goes. So I had to plug that. It was clipped on to the back of this bracket. I got that clip off, and I just tucked it up there in the brake line so it doesn't fall down behind and I forget about it. So I think I can move on to trying to get that EGR tube off, which is going to be, I can tell you right now, an absolute nightmare. Okay, so I've been working on how to even get a wrench onto that nut for the EGR tube for about an hour now. And I decided that I had to take off this. So basically it's got two bolts on the bottom, and I'll show you where those are at, and then one on top here. And for whatever reason, well, I know the reason, held on, not by a regular bolt, but these little Phillips head screws. Okay? And the reason is, probably the CEO of Nissan was at a garage sale and found a bucket full for $1 and was like, you know what? I'll throw those into circulation. So basically, you got that one on top. I don't even know if you can see, but I had to have this throttle jammed open to be able to get onto the lower ones. There. See those two mounting holes right there? Those are for the bottom. So I had this jammed open, and that would make it a little easier to get onto. And that one over there in the very back, I stripped. It's because they were pretty dang tight. But they have kind of like a Phillips screw, plus you can also use a flathead on them. So I got, this is what I had to take them out with. Put tape on that bit so it doesn't slide out of my 1/4 inch socket. So that was a pain, but now that we got that out of the way, also it has a vacuum line right there that plugged into it. So that's that stupid thing. So get that off, use the right size Phillips bit, more likely less odds of stripping it out, but when you do strip it out, then have fun. Now we have a little bit of a hole right here. We might be able to get our crescent wrench on that, so let's see how that goes. Alright, so once I got the that thing I was just showing you out of the way, I was able to get my adjustable wrench in here and gave it a good turn. And once I turned it, about a 1/4 turn, I was able to spin it out by hand. So I was a little concerned it was going to spin out hard the whole way, but it came off pretty easy once I got it cracked loose. But there's no flexibility to that tube. It goes right down into the exhaust manifold, so I know that's off all the way because I can pull it back a little bit, but I don't want to tweak that tube too much and then not have it lined back up later. So I think I'm going to leave it like that, and maybe when we're pulling the intake off, we just have to go that way with it a little bit to get it to come out. Hopefully that'll work to our favor. Alright, now I'm working on those coolant tubes on the back of the engine here. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see them, but let's see. Right here, well, you see right there, I know it's almost impossible to see, but that's one I took off. That one was the easier one. And the one that you're definitely not going to be able to see is right next to it. Let's see. It is well, you can't really see it, but you can see the right there. That's like the clamp for it, the pinch clamp. And it's going straight up and down. So I was able to slide that one coming in from the side off, but that one that goes straight up and down doesn't really have anywhere to go. And the hose is only like 4 or 5 inches long, so I think as far as I know, that's all I need to unhook. I guess we'll find out here in a minute. Because now I'm just going to go ahead and zip the Allen bolts out right here and pull this thing up and see what else is still attached. So yeah, and I did get the clamp off that shorter one, like I said, so I'm hoping I could pull the intake up, and then I can move that hose a little, so maybe me pulling the intake off will make that come apart. So Well, you guys have missed about several temper tantrums. So here's the intake bolts that go in here. And there's, I think, 6 of them. And they were all kind of stripped out. And also, somebody's had this intake off before and they must have ran them all down with their 1/2-inch impact. I could not get them to come off. All I was doing was completely rounding out the Allen. So I had to get this thing, and I had to heat up the heads of these bolts till they're glowing red, at the risk of burning down all the wiring harnesses running around on top of there, in order to get them out and hammer a oversized, I think, 1/4-inch Allen key into them. But to be honest, before that I was getting ready to throw in the towel and say I guess it's going to have leaky valve cover gaskets. But the thought of putting it back together after all the stuff I've torn off, I didn't like. So now, as you can see, it's loose. And now I'm just finding a bunch more stuff that's attached. So you got this tiny little sensor in here. Here's a wire coming off of it. And that plug right here was plugged in down here on top of the AC compressor. And that, not on the AC compressor, but the plug was over by it down here. You do need to unhook this breather hose as well. That goes from this valve cover over to the tube back there. I'm also seeing 2 little vacuum lines back there that are going. I think this one's one right here. I'll get a darker. Yeah, that one right there is one. And there's one back in there that you probably can't see. Maybe. It's just, I can't believe. I mean, it's a good thing these don't break down too often, for me anyway, because if I had to work on this all the time, I probably wouldn't. Because there's just so much junk going around. So here's the beginning of these little vacuum lines. Looks like there's a hose here that I already pulled off, probably when I was yanking on it. And then they're going around, so I think those are O2 sensor wires that are the red and blue that were clipped onto that bracket right there. You gotta push those out because that bracket's going up with the intake. Try not to drop anything down in one of these holes. That'd probably be a bad idea. So let me continue pulling stuff apart and hopefully I can get this stupid thing off here pretty soon. Alright, one last, so here's the gasket for it. Now, there we can get a better look at what's going on back here. So here's, this will be on the back driver's side. Here's one of the vacuum ports you need to undo, and then the one up here on this looks like some kind of a vacuum diaphragm. Diaphragm. Looks like there's one right here that I didn't unhook. That unhooked itself when I was pulling it off. Here's those 2 coolant tubes. This would be on the back, more on the passenger side, I guess. You can see them right there. One's going right, one's going straight down. And this one that's going straight down right here, that one I just took the squeeze clamp off and just pulled the intake off because there's nowhere, you can't really push that down. Also, I noticed you got 2 things that are plugged in back here. You got this gray plug here, and then this brown one here. So you can't even see those unless you got this thing lifted up kinda. So I had it tilted up kinda like this. I reached in there and thank God it didn't have some weird plug clips on them, because you know, everybody's got to have their own special fancy plugs. They can't just have the ones like the old GMs used to have, like these ones here. You push this green thing in that way, and that's how these unplug. That's kind of weird. That took me about 20 minutes to figure that out. So, and some of them have things you push down, some of them have things you gotta slide. It's just ridiculous. But yeah. So now, after all that BS, now we can get into the valve cover gaskets. So this one looks like it's pretty much ready to come off. I did notice it's got, you know, it's got about 50 pounds worth of these little vacuum lines and stuff going all over the place for whatever reason. So of course there's a couple more of those to unplug off this line, so that'll be cool. And then over here we got about 25 pounds worth of wires on top of this valve cover. I think we should be able to just unclip them from their little brackets right here and fold them up out here out of the way. Here's the back side of these two plugs I was showing you, and here's the hoses, which I do not know where the squeeze clamps went for those. Hopefully they didn't go into this intake hole. So we'll find out when we go to start it. So remember how I said earlier to be careful you don't drop anything in any of these intake runners? Well, when I was taking those coolant tube hoses off, it said the clamps, I couldn't get them to slide down the hose far enough, so I just slid them up like this and left them on the metal part. Everything's falling out of my pocket. And then went ahead and yanked that off, and I heard them fall out of there. One of them hit the ground. I don't know where the other one did, so I was like, Murphy Law says it probably went down the intake runner. So I went to work, borrowed the scope, and I don't know if you can see it, because I can see it, but there it is, the hose clamp down in that rudder. Not a big deal. I brought a magnet too so I can get it out. But yeah, you gotta be careful, you know, drop anything in there, because if that didn't cross my mind, I would have put this back together and fired it up, and probably would have made some clanking noises. I think that clamp might have been a little too big to actually go through there, but it definitely would have started chewing everything up. So I guess while I got this, I'm going to just check down through all these holes while I have this machine here, and I'll get that clamp out. Alright, so over here on the passenger side valve cover, I've got all these wires. I just you can see the bracket down here that they clip onto, and they just push off that. And I'm just trying to swing them up here out of the way, kinda. I will say that, like, a lot of these wires and wire connectors on this car are really brittle. I had to unplug the O2 sensors over here. You can see the ends of them because they were going underneath these fuel lines, which I didn't want to disconnect, so I unplugged those, and the plastic plugs basically broke apart. I'm going to have to make sure I do some double checking on all these wires, because I did get this one right here pretty hot when I was torching. I got it out of the way as far as I could, but it still got pretty hot while I was heating up those bolts to get that upper intake off. And then, like, look at this wire right here on this fuel injector. See, it's got a pretty good kink in it. Right there. It's got a kink in it. Hopefully that wire's not broken. Oh, yep, it is. I just moved it and I watched the wire split open. So that's good. The wire itself's not bad. I can just put some liquid tape on that, I guess, for the time being. Hopefully this thing doesn't turn into an electrical nightmare. About the ones that are underneath the intake, I'm not even going to touch those. So yeah, now I can actually take these off, I think. So they're held on by Phillips head screws, of course. So hopefully they're not outrageously tight and they all just strip out, because that would that'd be pretty suiting, though. That's kind of like everything on this car's been so far. So I already got a 1/4 inch socket with a big Phillips bit that fits those nicely. I'm going to get them going on my electric ratchet and buzz these things off here. Well, that was actually fairly straightforward. After you get all your junk out of the way, they come right off. And these rubber gaskets in here have a little bit of rubberness to them left, but I almost wonder if you could get away with it just tightening them up a little bit, because all those screws were pretty dang loose. You can see, like, here's the top side of this one, so this would have been up towards the center of the engine, and that's the bottom, and you can see how it's all oily. Same deal over here. The top of this is actually what would have been facing downhill, and that's all oily. So I haven't actually looked at my gasket set yet. I'm hoping it comes with new little, the screws have these rubber grommets around them. So I'm hoping that the kit comes with these new rubber grommets here. Now before I put this back together, I'm going to have to go to the store tomorrow, because I need to buy some new... This doesn't look to me like any kind of crazy thread, so I'm pretty sure I should be able to find these at my local hardware store. Probably gonna have to stick. These are for the intake manifold that I was saying earlier I was struggling with. And a 6mm Allen head, and probably like an M8 by 1 or something. Looks like a pretty standard metric thread, so get some more of these. Probably gonna have to keep, unless they had this size bolt with a 10, I'd get that, but the 13, somebody replaced one with a 13. The problem is there's not enough room in there for a 13 and to get your socket around it hardly, so that's not gonna work out so well. So I guess before I finish for tonight, I'm going to go ahead and pull these spark plugs out, put the new ones in while I got the intake off, because I think you'll find it a lot easier this way. Alright, we're getting our new valve cover gaskets put on. We got this brand here. Got all the stuff from Rock Auto. They usually have the best deals on the higher end parts, and also they have like a quite big selection of parts for all different types of vehicles. So, after I got the old rubber gaskets peeled out of there, I went ahead and used some brake cleaner. Kind of clean the grease off these on the outside, and I cleaned this groove out here. So we want that to be nice and clean and dry, free of oil, because well, let me first figure out which way this gasket goes on, like that. So I always like to use this stuff here. It's called high tack. I don't know if you can read that or not. There. Keep this at work, and that does a good job at holding gaskets onto stuff. As you can see, it's how stringy and tacky it is. So I'm just going to brush this on all the way around. You don't want to, this is, you know, to get these off, you're holding up a bunch of wires and sliding underneath this and around that, and you're bumping up against stuff. So it's going to be real easy to knock the gasket off. And the worst case would be if you knocked it out of its little groove here and didn't realize it until you go to start it later and have to do all this over again. So we got to really pay attention to make sure that this is in fact in place, the gasket's still in place, before we continue putting this car back together. Alright, now we'll let that high tack dry up. It don't take long, but we'll let it get more tacky, so hopefully it won't let the gasket come out. And I already did this side, so hopefully it won't be good. Alright, now the only other thing I gotta do is I gotta put these new like grommets on the screws. So I'm gonna get that done real quick. Finally got the valve covers back on, so I replaced all those little grommets for those screws. You can see the rubber there is squished out the sides. So I'm not sure what the torque spec on those were. I figured though that's not going to be real tight, so because you're only going to be able to torque these down so far until you would squish that rubber out completely and split that. So you don't want to do that. So basically I ran them down initially with my 3/8 electric ratchet. Didn't get them tight at all with that, and then I just went over them with a regular screwdriver and got them, you know, pretty snug, but not like real snug. So that's my torque spec. Pretty snug, but not real snug with a regular screwdriver. And I'll see how that works out for me. Now, before I put the bolts back in, I got and you know what I'm talking about, like when you're trying to like push this back in over top of all this junk. Something like this right here could catch that gasket and peel it out of the groove. So before I got them in place, and I was able to lift them up enough to get my fingers underneath and just go around the whole thing, making sure that gasket was still there. That's super important. Okay, because you don't want to do this twice. Trust me. So yeah, now all I gotta do is put that intake back on, hook up about 6,000 wires and 7,000 vacuum lines, try to get those coolant tubes in the back hooked back up, which I did inspect those, and those rubber tubes still are in pretty good shape, surprisingly. So I guess I'm just gonna put them back on. But those, you know, these two rubber tubes right here, before you put your intake back on, if yours seem like they're really hard or overly squishy, or they got cracks in them, you might want to change these because they're an absolute nightmare. So best to do it now when you can actually get them off. We got the spark plugs in, we got the valve cover gaskets changed. I'm going to do something kind of cheesy. I never got to do intake gasket. Ugh. Nothing really. It's a steel with like rubber injection or something on it. Doesn't really look bad, so I think I'm just going to clean it off and put some silicone around each of these holes. And then put it back on, and I'm sure it'll be fine. I like to use this silicone here, the Ultra Gray High Torque. That's probably the best silicone. Alright, well I guess this will be the ending of the video. I still have to put on a couple of things like the air cleaner stuff, and I need to put on the distributor cap and wires, which is something you're gonna have to put back on. And what I did was I just labeled the cap. I don't know if you can see any of my writings. Yeah, I labeled the cap. I didn't use like Nissan's firing order. I basically wrote on there like a small block Chevy firing order, because I know that one. But you can write whatever you want, just as long as you remember what it is. You know, like for me it's gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I know that. I remember it. So that'll help me put them back on. I'm actually gonna put a new cap rotor and stuff on. I think I might do a video in the future about how to change spark plugs, how most people would, where you have to go through and do all that fun stuff. So I probably won't get too much into that here. And I got some more things to put on up here, because I put a new timing belt and water pump on this too. So I'm going to finish all that up, but I'll end this video here. I don't remember mentioning this, but there is a vacuum line in the back for the fuel regulator. See if I can find it. It's just impossible to see anything back here. There. That's actually a green hose for like a lawnmower. I just stuck on there because that's what I had, but because the old one broke. Because I didn't see it, didn't realize there was anything there, and I tore the line basically when I took the intake off. So be careful with that. That's a third line back there you have to disconnect. I got all my... I never unplugged any of these. I just unclipped them because they all have these like brackets like right here. And I just slid them back in. I do have to tidy up these back here. I did unplug these because I needed to move the wiring harness this way, and all these were going underneath the fuel lines, so I unplugged them. And those are for O2 sensors. You got 4 of them. See, that one there's got the blue and red covers on them, and of course I broke the plastic clips because everything plastic on this crumbles, so I just re-zip tied those there to that bracket where they were originally attached. So yeah, just make sure those don't fall down and burn on anything hot is basically all you need to do. And that should cover it. I got the throttle cables put back on. Another thing I did was, like, there's some vacuum lines running around, and for me to be able to remember, you know, a little bit easier to plug them back in, I would put my red paint marker and put dots and stuff here and there. Like if there was 2 vacuum lines plugging in over here, I didn't want to get them mixed up, so I put 2 dots to 2 dots and 1 and 1. So, you know, if you want to invest in a red paint marker or something to help you label stuff or whatever, it comes in handy. When it makes it a little easier to put stuff back together. Again, don't forget to plug in those 2 electrical plug-ins that go down here underneath the intake before you actually bolt this down. And then after it's all said and done, make sure the wires are free back there and they're not like getting pinched under anything. Cause you problems down the road. You know, and you got these 2 grounds here coming off this wiring harness, and they go here and here, I think, or here and here. So don't forget to hook those back up along with these little spark plug wire brackets and the bracket that holds the harness here. That's basically it, you know. So I hope you found this video helpful to you, and I will see you in the next one.